Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you, Eileen.
Welcome to the second meeting under the Autumn Group's umbrella. This is a very special year indeed for Soroptimist worldwide, as it marks 100 years since the inception of the organization, which started in California in 1921. Sue Challoner of SI Runcorn has set out how it all began in the form of a play. And tonight we are going to hear from a selection of ladies who will share their experiences with us. Sharon Dixon is our narrator for the evening, and Raina Rees is the producer.
Thank you, Eileen. And as you can see by my hat, can you all see me?
Yeah.
Good. Because when I look in the mirror, it's a mirror image, but apparently you can see it. I'd like to thank everybody for the part that they've taken. And I'm just going to introduce very quickly everybody in the order that they appear. So Irwin is from the US of A, and she's playing Violet Richardson Ward. Judith is a Viscountess Falmouth, very posh indeed. Frances is Margaret Adams with an OBE. And Sue Davis is French. She is Dr. Suzanne Noel. Ruth is Elizabeth Hawes. She has an MBE. And Elizabeth Glandon is played by two people, Sue Jones and Sue Bennett. Gaynor, our president, is Gertrude G. Hewitt. Our narrator, and really an excellent narrator, is Sharon. And the producer is me. And our techie guy, our technical liaison, is Helen Murdoch, who really has had a lot to do with this. So I'm now going to hand you over to our narrator, to Sharon, to take over. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Raina. I think we have a film that we're going to watch before I start. Thank you, Helen. Every reality starts with an idea. The idea was that an organisation for women be formed to work in friendship, combine expertise, and give service. Let's go back 100 years to early 1921, when Rotarian Stuart Morrow met with this group of women in Oakland, California, to talk to them about forming a women's Soroptimist club. On the 3rd of October 1921, in the Ivy Room of the Oakland Hotel, the first Soroptimist Club was chartered. Violet Richardson Ward was elected as the first Soroptimist president. Violet.
What a wonderful evening we had at our charter. We had managed to get 80 women in Alameda County interested and ready to join, and become the first Soroptimists. The presentation of the charter and the officer installation ceremony was done in a very formal style, but afterwards, as you can see, we had a wonderful time. I was really honoured to be the first president of the club. My mother always said that being a Soroptimist was the best thing I ever did. But physical education has always been my first love. And as director in the Berkeley, California schools, I had to organise all the physical education courses from kindergarten through to high school and on to university level. When I was approached about being a Soroptimist, I said, not unless it is to be an international organisation. I have never had time for those women's groups where they drink tea and gossip. I think our brains were meant to be expanded, and I think women are born internationalists. I certainly remember my time as president of the first Soroptimist Club. What an honour it was to chair those meetings. However, I was a stickler for time. I liked to start and finish our meetings on the dot. But boy, did we work hard. And what a time we had with our first project. This was to save the redwoods, those beautiful, enormous trees that some crafty business people and politicians wanted to cut down for profit. We Soroptimists got out and worked, believe me. We went to the state legislature, we wrote letters, we rang doorbells, and we were successful and were able to save those beautiful trees.
This early action set the precedent for future Soroptimist involvement in legislative advocacy and its subsequent relationship with the United Nations. This was the original intent of service and has progressed in this way in all Soroptimist federations. The Soroptimist movement was progressing to other parts of America, and in 1924, women in Europe heard about it, and clubs were chartered in London and Paris. Dr. Suzanne Noel was the first president of the Paris Club, and Lady Falmouth, president of the Greater London Club. Lady Falmouth.
I must say that after that dreadful war, the idea of a women's group dedicated to service and offering friendship with an international scope was very appealing. I met with Mr. Morrow, an American Rotarian who was mentioned earlier. He told me about the Oakland Californian Soroptimist Club, and it wasn't long before I was able to persuade a number of my very influential friends to form a club in London. This was in 1924. We had a great variety of classifications: an architect, a financier on the London Stock Exchange, a dental surgeon. I am an horticulturist, and I looked for women who were not only outstanding in their professions, but who were champions of women's rights too. We had engineers and doctors, hoteliers, and a filmmaker, as well as the executive secretary of George Bernard Shaw. We met every Thursday for a luncheon meeting, and one of the first projects was to form a loan training fund to help young women in a variety of vocations. We always began and ended our meetings on time. I'd heard say that Violet Richardson Ward was a stickler for promptness. We also felt publicity was important to our club. We invited outstanding people as speakers, people who we knew would command attention in the press, and so Soroptimists benefited. It helped that we were able to charter 7 more Soroptimist clubs throughout the major cities of Great Britain.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Lady Falmouth. I was a founder member of Liverpool Club, which your club helped charter in 1927. I was a teacher by profession and headmistress of a school in my home city. I enjoyed being a Soroptimist and meeting women from so many different professions and businesses. I was very pleased and honoured to be elected as the president of the National Union of Soroptimist Clubs of Great Britain in 1934. And I attended the historic International Convention in Paris in 1934 with a presiding officer and the president of Soroptimist Europe, Dr. Suzanne Noël. This was a wonderful experience and a moment in Soroptimist history, as it was at this convention where SI Great Britain and Ireland split away from SI Europe, and 3 federations were formed: SI Americas, SI Europe, and SI Great Britain and Ireland, or SIGB for the short. I had the great honour of becoming the first Federation President of SIGB. President Suzanne had asked each country representative attending the convention to prepare a 15-minute presentation on the professional position of women. And from the accounts of Soroptimist activities in various countries, it was evident that there was power and vitality in our movement, combined with high ideals and a strong desire to give service. These presentations gave evidence of the progress of women in various countries and the unanimous opinion that Soroptimists must uphold the right of women to work in careers for which they were fitted.
Bonjour, Margaret. Mais oui, that was certainly a superb convention. I have to tell you, I spent so much time learning the English language to prepare for this meeting of Soroptimist nations, as I wanted to welcome members from around the world to my beautiful city of Paris. Oui, Margaret, certainement. The presentations you mentioned, they were also quite disturbing, no? Country after country reported the closing of opportunities for women, the lowering of salaries, and the prejudice against married professional women. We certainly had a long road ahead to reach equality. Maybe. I am quite used to working against the odds. I received my medical license to practice surgery at a time when very few French women entered the profession. I have always supported equal rights. However, the legal status of women was different in each of the European countries, and our Soroptimist movement was slow to spread outside Paris. But once we reached Holland, we started to grow rapidly. I found women leaders who were eager to work together wherever I went. My own speciality of plastic surgery gave me the opportunity to travel and lecture about my work and also about the Soroptimist organization, which I consider to be mon bébé. And I was known by many as Marraine, or godmother in the English. I was in the Orient in 1936 and was able to charter clubs in Japan and China. One of the most challenging aspects of this extension work for me was to visit countries hostile to France, and yet still able to bring the Soroptimist movement to them and create lasting friendships.
It was around this time, 1936, when everything gathered momentum. Soroptimists were active around the world, and 2 years later, in 1938, the International Convention was held in Atlantic City. This was the largest international gathering of Soroptimists ever, and saw international committees established and the Constitution amended to provide for an international liaison secretary, who would function as an SI staff person to draw the 3 federations together. Elizabeth Hawes, president of SIGB at the time, was just the right person for this new position, which was supposedly for 4-year term. Little did Elizabeth know she would hold the office for 10 years because of World War II. But let Elizabeth tell her story. Elizabeth.
My education in England gave me fluency in several languages, and this was a great help in my international work. I was a member of the Greater London Club, where I met many outstanding women, including an amazing woman from Australia, Edith Glanville.
I was fortunate to meet Elizabeth and other members of Soroptimist Greater London Club when I was travelling around the world on a lecture tour as a liaison officer at the League of Nations, promoting the work of the Society. I had formed the Quota Club in Australia in 1932, which was intended to function on somewhat similar lines to the men's Rotary clubs, with members open to women who were doing public and professional work and were engaged in business activities. 5 years later, still president, I returned its charter and Quota Club became the first Soroptimist club in Australia. The Soroptimist Club of Sydney was born in 1937. Being a Soroptimist enabled members to have more of an international focus. The first Soroptimists tended to be middle class, educated, and engaged in work, business, or public life. Foundation members of Sydney's Soroptimist Club included one of the first trained dentists in New South Wales, a dance and theatre critic, and Australia's first female architect, engineer and pilot. Other members included sculptors, singers, teachers, financiers, secretaries, political organisers, and horticulturalists. At the end of my term of office, when I stepped down, I was delighted to be made a life president. I believe this was in recognition of my work for the club. The Soroptimist Club of Sydney went on to do great things and supported many other clubs formed in Australia and beyond. I was so pleased to have met Elizabeth Hawes and the Greater London Soroptimist Club.
Yes, we became lifelong friends, didn't we, Edith? And we both have so much to thank Soroptimists for. When I attended the Atlantic City Convention, I was coming to the end of my time as SIGBY president. This was in the summer of 1938. I was very honoured to be elected as the first international liaison secretary. What a challenging experience that was. Throughout World War II, I remained in London. Soroptimists from all over the world visited me, bringing a spirit of hope, cheer, and goodwill. Hundreds of parcels reached me despite torpedoed ships, damaged ports, bombed railways, and battered post offices. I spent every weekend opening and distributing these parcels to the needy, always helped by Soroptimists, of course. My main concern was to hold our 3 Soroptimist federations together. As you can imagine, it was a difficult task. In many countries, citizens were deprived of all normal human rights, forbidden the freedom of opinion, of speech, and of meeting together. Correspondence was censored, conversations overheard, and it was almost impossible to trust anyone. I remember Dr. Madeleine Garot, the president of the European Federation, saying that she had to hide all papers and minutes of the Federation under the coal. I sent her a Red Cross telegram at the time saying only, working hard and hopeful. And she told me later it meant a great deal to know that European Soroptimists were not forgotten and that it inspired them to hold on until the day of victory. The overwhelming generosity of friends overseas was far-reaching. This kind of spiritual as well as material sympathy and international understanding was beyond price. In November 1946, we were able to hold our Federation Conference in London and invited members from both the American and European federations. I was at last able to give my report and heartfelt thanks in the presence of American Soroptimists. At that conference, I introduced the idea of friendship links and challenged those attending conference to start an interchange of visits, possibly on a club basis, correspondence, conference meetings. These were some of the immediate possibilities before us at the international level, and they had a direct bearing on the work of the United Nations, to which many of us pledged ourselves to give life service. At that time, the UN was in its infancy, just a year old. You could say we came in at the ground floor.
How Elizabeth Hawes managed to maintain contracts with Soroptimists in occupied Europe, no one will ever know for certain. But it is certain that she had her own underground network of brave women throughout Europe during those dark and dangerous days. Now let us move along to 1948. The war had come to an end and Europe was being rebuilt. Not only had the three federations survived the stress of war, but each had grown, and members had been drawn more closely together across national frontiers. At this time, there were 20,000 members in 571 clubs in 16 countries. At the 1948 International Convention in Harrogate, Soroptimists saw flags from Australia, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, China, Denmark, France, Italy, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, USA, and Great Britain. At this conference, representatives were nominated UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, and the United Nations on a consultative basis. Tina Wine from the Netherlands became the first Soroptimist observer to UNESCO. Soroptimists were now contributing to world issues. And in 1950, the Soroptimist International Association was listed on the roster with ECOSOC, the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and could join other non-governmental organizations at public ECOSOC meetings. Over the next 4 years, the Soroptimist movement grew, and in 1952, there were 841 clubs in 22 countries. The 1952 convention was held in Copenhagen, and after 3 days of exciting reports from the three federations, the laws were changed, and the first Soroptimist International president was elected. Mrs. Gertrude G. Hewitt, a past president of the Federation of the Americas, and the first international president. Gertrude.
What an honour it was to be the first international president. Actually, it was Madeleine Gorrow who had first talked about the need for officers. I was to serve for 4 years until 1956. And it was the most challenging time of my life. I was a practicing lawyer, but it was a monumental task to pioneer the new procedures and policies of the Soroptimist International Association, with its 3 federations and growing numbers of clubs. The problems and the joys of the assignment, with misunderstandings of translation, caused some pain and anguish, I must say. But we survived those early difficulties, and I realized that no gem can be polished without a great deal of friction. Clubs in the 3 federations were learning about the United Nations in the post-war world. And while our organisation was pledged to neutrality on sectarian, religious and party political matters, members were strong in support of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was proclaimed by the UN on December the 10th, 1948, as a common standard of achievements for all peoples and all nations. It set out, for the first time, fundamental human rights to be universally protected. I presided at our 1956 convention in New York, the first held in America since 1938. Delegates adopted a formal resolution to secure women's rights in respect of equal access to education, equal economic opportunities, and equal pay for equal work. And as I saw the flags of all the great nations where Soroptimists rendered service, I felt a great enthusiasm, honour and pride. Soroptimist International strength is in the federations, and the federations are what create our international whole.
Our organisation has grown over the intervening years. In Sigby, Soroptimist International spread to Africa, the Caribbean and Asia. The first club in Africa was chartered in Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia, in 1956, was followed swiftly by clubs in South Africa and onwards throughout the continent. In the Caribbean, the first club chartered was in Trinidad in 1959. The story of Soroptimists in the Caribbean is one of steady growth and increase in service to the community, with 12 clubs formed in 6 countries between 1959 and 1983. Pakistan saw the first club chartered in Asia in 1969, followed by clubs in Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Meanwhile, what was happening in the Southwest Pacific, Edith can tell us.
Yes, happy to. As I mentioned earlier, Soroptimist International Sydney Club received its charter in 1937, and the Federation of Great Britain and Ireland, Sigby, claimed its fledgling club. As you can imagine, World War II added confusion to the operation of the club, as contact with the British Federation was severely hampered. However, the Soroptimist movement gathered momentum after the war. More clubs were formed throughout Australia and into New Zealand and onwards. However, it was not until 1978 that the fourth federation, Soroptimist International of the Southwest Pacific, was formed. The inauguration ceremony of the federation was held in Adelaide at Easter in 1978. Such a great moment for all when Soroptimist International President Hilda Richardson from Great Britain handed over the charter of the Federation of the Southwest Pacific to Her Excellency Maurice King and invested her with the insignia SISWIP.
From its early beginnings and first club chartered in 1956 in Zimbabwe, the Soroptimist movement in Africa has been growing at an incredible pace, and members have worked hard to form a new federation of Soroptimist International in Africa. Finally, in April 2020, the new federation, SIAF, was born. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the members have not been able to meet together and are looking forward to the day when they can celebrate properly a 5th Soroptimist Federation.
100 years after the birth of Soroptimists, our fight for women's rights and gender equality continues. International President Sharon Fisher is leading the Road to Equality campaign for Soroptimists globally. Since the founding of the very first Soroptimist Club in Oakland, California, Soroptimists have they've sought to bring about change to the lives of women and girls worldwide. Through its global network of 5 federations and dedicated volunteers of over 72,000 members in 121 countries, Soroptimists are driven by the mission of transforming lives through education, empowerment, and by enabling opportunities. Looking back to a bright past, moving forward into our brilliant future and the next 100 years of Soroptimist International.
Thank you.
Do we clap now or later?
Anytime.
Well done.
Well done.
Thank you, ladies. It was
Well done.
excellent. Really, really well done. And thank you for all your hard work.
I'm unmuted though, I can clap properly.
Sharon as our narrator, Raina as our director, And of course, Helen, who's probably worked harder than anyone else.
Yeah.
And of course, we mustn't forget all our wonderful actresses.
Oh,
You know, come on. Helen Mirren's got nothing on us. You know, just think about it, ladies. Well done, and thank you very much.
Oh, well done. Yes, very good.
And now, because yesterday was World Peace Day, in a few minutes, we're going to light some candles for world peace. You might wonder, what is World Peace Day? It's the International Day of Peace. Peace Day is observed across the world and started around 1981 by the UN. Peace Day provides a global shared date for humanity to commit to peace above all differences and to contribute to a culture of peace. 2021 is particularly significant as it's the 20th anniversary of the UN resolution on the Programme of Action on the Culture of Peace. The theme for 2021 Peace Day is Recovering Better for an Equitable and Sustainable World. I'm now going to light a candle for SI, Soroptimist International. If my matches will work. Hang on.
Oh, well done.
International Peace Candle for Soroptimist International. Judith, can you light the candle, please, for Soroptimist GB and Ireland?
A pleasure in lighting this candle.
Oh, that's better. Yeah, I can see that.
I'll hold mine up for you. Mine is
That's better. Lovely. Good.
That we found in my mother's bungalow. I'll ask Raina, please, to light a candle for Soroptimist Wales South, the region.
Right, it gives me great pleasure to light this candle on behalf of our region, SI Wales South, and here we go.
Lovely.
Thank you, Raina. And last of all, I'd like to ask Eileen to light a candle for Soroptimist Bridgend, our club.
It's delightful to light this for all our lovely members and for all the effort that they've all put into all the activities we've had to undergo under the threat of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So now we have our 4 candles of peace. Thank you, ladies.